Hello, this is Rolando Garza, and I'm the archaeologist and chief of resource management here at Palo Alto Battlefield National Historical Park. And today, I'd like to talk to you about Freedman Cemetery Project, a project I was on early in my career. I can't begin to tell you how important it was to my career. Anyway, I also want to give you a warning. This does involve the exhumation of burials and human remains. So if anybody's sensitive or you think it's inappropriate for anybody in your household, please leave and whatever. Out of respect to the deceased and their descendants, I did try and blur out any pictures that contain human remains in them. Regardless, this is an archaeological endeavor, and in my heart, I know this project corrected an injustice that was done to the Black community during the 20th century. Freedman Cemetery. So during the 3-year period from January 92 to December of 1994, we exhumed and examined the physical remains and associated grave goods of over 1,157 men, women, and children. Why? Why did this project happen? The Texas Department of Transportation, TxDOT, was going to widen Highway 75, and because it's using federal funds, it triggers compliance with Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966, which means you got to account for any impacts to known or unknown cultural resources. Well, we did know there was a cemetery there. In the beginning, when the project principal investigator of the project, Jerry Henderson, who worked with a TxDOT archaeologist, began this. She told me that at the beginning when they were looking at, they said they estimated maybe about a dozen to 20 burials out there. Well, they were definitely off. But I also want to point out, as I said earlier, this project did correct. This is what the cemetery looked like in the early 1990s, just a big grassy field. The Black community lost title to the property during the 1920s, and sometime during the 20th century, all the headstones and grave markers were removed. We actually did find some used as road base on the adjacent Campbell Avenue, and it was made into a city park. So really, and at the end of this project, we rededicated this as a cemetery to honor and give the dignity back to the people who are buried there. This is a Sanborn map from 1905 showing this colored cemetery next to the Hebrew cemetery, Catholic cemetery, which all those, actually the Hebrew cemetery is still active and in existence, and I believe the Catholic and all that too, although it's been 30 years since I've been there and worked in that area. But that, and here is one of the headstones we found. We put it back together that was used as road base there. So we began searching in the known. That was a big grassy field out there to see if we could identify grave stains. And yes, they were clear. Grave stains were clear out there in the soil. And then we went on to the unknown to try and define the extent of the cemetery. And we started on the other side of the frontage road. That is the principal investigator, Jerry Henderson. Obviously, it was a cold day that day. But thank God, none of the burials went past the frontage road. They were underneath the frontage road, but not beyond. So we would have to use heavy equipment, jackhammer, to break up the asphalt and concrete, and then peel it back with a Gradall, and then scrape the ground till we get to grave stains. As the frontage road and the equipment and the dump truck are sitting on the frontage road, as the frontage road connected with Lemon Avenue, the road went down, and it actually, some of the road base was on top of some of the barrels. This is very close to that place. At this point, I would like to give a shout out to the Gradall operator, Richie. I can't remember Richie's last name, But man, he did a great job. He had a lot of skill and patience with us archaeologists, but he could operate that Gradall because it's a very delicate procedure, hard. You just got to remove less than an inch at a time. And those are some of the day laborers, Modesto, Erasmo, and Alfonso. And sitting back, you really can't see is archaeologist Dan Lauteber taking some notes on some of the stains that are recently recorded or are exposed. So this is what it looked like, the plan view of what it looked like. We never investigated this right here, the section 1869 and 1879, because that was part of the active Hebrew cemetery. So we developed a system. I was the first field hand hired, and I probably worked by myself for 2 or 3 months before we started hiring other personnel. But we developed the stride of attack. Let me just say this as well. Jerry Henderson, for years before, I mean, this project had been going on for years. We started excavations. I was hired in January 92. This started in the late 80s, and Jerry Henderson doing the research. And she had her and TxDOT had been reaching out to the Black community, to the descendants, and getting their input and help strategize the methodology here and the amount of research that would be done on the skeletal remains after they've been exhumed. So that was all done with input and collaboration with the descendant community. We'd expose the headstones. You see the little metal plaque on the middle? Uh, and the key thing, as you soon find out when you're doing this job, every burial is different. Every burial, the preservation condition of the actual skeletal remains is different in every burial. No matter they date to the same period or in close proximity, and just every burial is different. I will say it one more time. Every burial is different. This is a child's casket here. You can see the hardware on top, the wooden casket, hexagonal. This is one of the few cast iron caskets we had. It had big plate glass windows on top, but as you can see, a utility pole was drilled into the middle of the burial. Like I said, every burial is different. And then you have to expose the skeletal remains using wooden instruments. You got to be careful. Don't want to impact the bones any. You want to be as delicate as possible. It's a tedious project, but you develop the skills as you go on. Like I said, I graded out just out of respect for the people that are buried. Expose you got to expose the skeletal remains. Expose, that be the morning task. You get to the lid the day before, and in the morning you take off the lid. You do that. All the earth, all the soil matrix that's within the casket, it needs to be collected and screened. We didn't screen stuff that was outside the casket, only the stuff that was inside this casket. Then you document it. After you get the barrel full exposed, you photograph it. We did black and white and color photography on every barrel. We did maps, we did notes, narrative description of the burials. We had a form, but we also had a lot of freedom and what you would want to write in your narrative. Document in situ. That's part of the mapping with the measuring sticks. I'm sorry, before that was archaeologist Randall Banks. There'll be another picture of him, and this is archaeologist Laura Talbot. I made some good friends that I remain in contact, that I still am close to and love dearly. This is archaeology Randall Banks and archaeologist Bernard Slaughter. I do not recognize the two laborers there. Sometimes we did go through those guys a couple of quickly. We were TxDOT employees, and these guys were the contractors' employees. Like I said, then we screened all the material that came out of the burials, out of the caskets. And then we processed the bones in the osteology lab. That was Jarena. This is Jarena here again. The osteology lab was run by Cindy Condon, an osteologist. And we also partnered with her husband, Keith Condon, who had excavated Cedar Grove Cemetery in Arkansas in the 80s. And he worked at UT Medical School in Dallas. And once the remains were studied, documented, photographed, and put into the burial boxes. They were shipped over to UT Medical School to be housed in their morgue. So we have a burial chronology. And we know the cemetery was founded on April 29th, 1869. The early period was from 1869 to 1884, which we excavated about 64 burials from that period. And the middle period from 1885 to 1899, we excavated 208 burials from that period. And the late period from 1900 to 1907, we excavated 884 burials. Part of that is due because we're at the edge of the cemetery and they were pushing out, filling in spaces, but also the population of the Black community, of the Freedmen's community, could have been growing exponentially during that period, and that therefore require more burials. How did we get that chronology? How did we get the dates? Just like all the material culture, all technology is datable. There's trends and it changes through time. People use it just like cell phones, or cell phones are a great example. Look how they've changed and evolved over the past 20 years or so. Maybe 20 years is right. To that. Same with the casket hardware. I'd have to throw a shout out to Dr. James Davidson. He's now a professor at University of Florida. He was the one that developed the chronology based upon the casket hardware. But why? Why is it important what we're doing? Why would we spend tax dollar in doing this? It's because we want to come to a better understanding of the community, of the people of Freedman's Town. Yes, there's a lot of stuff written in the history books, a lot of stuff in the historic record, but that comes with a lot of bias. The archaeological record does not have that bias. It's what's left behind. It's what was left in the ground. Now, of course, it could be misinterpreted, but that's why we got to apply the scientific method when we do archaeology and systematically do the same excavations, take copious notes and good documentation. That way, the data will always be there to be reinterpreted by future archaeologists and all that. But that's what we're trying to. We're trying to get a more accurate, objective picture of the past and the day-to-day lives of the people in this community. Common variables that can be studied, that can be measured skeletally, include demography, growth and development, diet, infection, degenerative joint disease, and trauma. Measure of overall community health in North Dallas. Look at it. Look at these charts here. And then Cedar Grove's just put in there. It is contemporaneous, but it doesn't have it split up during these periods like this. And you can see how the mean age after the Civil War in the first period is below 15 years old, and by the turn of the century, after the turn of the century, it's up 20. And there's a direct correlation with infant deaths. Kids first stop making it past the year of one. Now we have possible matches of burials and death. We estimated that there were about 8,000 to 10,000 burials on the full 4 acres at Freedman Cemetery. And we only had about 600 death records, thanks to the ubiquitous courthouse fires and stuff. This is the only possible matches for female burials. And this is for male burials. If you notice them, they all seem to be dying from a gunshot. And that's not that there was a lot or more violence back then. It's just that those bullets give us an artifact that we can relate to a death record. So that's it. It's only coincidence. It's only coincidence that they're gunshot. It doesn't mean anything about the society back then. But people were getting shot just like they are getting today. But there you have it. Those are the only possible full match. I think one is really close. The other is, possible. Then we have the vernacular grave markings. They're on the surface, from shell artifacts to ceramics, bottles, Oil lamps was a common thing out there, signifying the trip to the other side. Ceramic figurines and bottles, plates. And inside the barrels, we did find the rubber syringe and a spoon, which you would think was part of the dosage of medicine, bottles, toys, guns. I know this toy gun came from a kid's barrel because I excavated that myself. Um, then we had this one barrel with this 9-year-old girl who had 7 bottles in there, which more than likely was medicine used in combating her final illness. Then we found a lot of perforated dimes, or a significant amount of perforated dimes. And as we find out through historic research, it was a charm used in the Black community to ward off evil spirits. Some people from the Dallas area in 1890. Like I said, the whole purpose of doing archaeology is trying to get a better, more accurate, objective understanding of people, of the day-to-day lives of the people who lived and deposited the material behind that we're doing. And this is a woman from Dallas. And I do have to add, so these people in these photographs are probably some of the more affluent people in that community, because it did cost money to get your portraits taken. And it was a luxury that not everybody could afford. Like I said, we're trying to get a better, more objective understanding of the lives of these people that made up Freedman's community. And we buried these boxes on adjacent property once we were finished with all the exhumations. And we dedicated the cemetery again, and we put this memorial, this monument to the people, to the Black community, to the people of Freedmanstown, to the people buried in the cemetery. The bronze figures that symbolize freedom in Africa. And we have the ones that symbolize enslavement in the Americas. Then we have emancipation. The freed slaves on their own, making the way to in the United States. And at that, I thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat. Thank you very much.